Hi, welcome to Accessibility with Meg. This is Meg. And today, what you're seeing on screen is the different kinds of disabilities and WCAG accessibility requirements that work with these disabilities to help with accessibility, right? So that's the topic that we're going to discuss today. And what you're looking at here are the different categories. So, the different kinds of disabilities that we kind of know and work with today are visual disabilities, auditory and speech disabilities, motor or dexterity disabilities, neurodiverse disabilities, mental health, cognitive and learning disabilities. Let's go down to understand each one of these. The first one is visual disabilities. Now, impairments that affect a person's ability to see or process visual information. It may range from partial vision loss to complete blindness, right? The different kinds or the types of visual disabilities, we can categorize them under blindness, which is a total or near total loss of vision, low vision, which is reduced visual acuity, even with correction, color blindness. So, color vision deficiency, basically. So, difficulty to distinguish between certain sets of colors like red and green, etc. And deaf blindness is a combined vision and hearing loss. So a person with deaf blindness cannot see and they cannot hear. Okay. Coming down to the WCAG requirements, you have things like 1.1.1 non-text content, which requires us to provide text alternatives for images, icons, and controls so screen readers can convey them. We have 1.4.3 and 1.4.6, which deal with color contrast, so contrast minimum and enhanced. So you need to have sufficient contrast between text and the background. That's essential. Also 1.4.1, which is use of color. And it just simply says that do not use color as the only way to convey information, right? That's important again. 1.4.4 is resize text. So the content needs to be able to be, like you should be able to zoom in to 200%. So the content is still preserves its integrity at a zoomed in text size of 200%. There's no blurring, it's clear, you can read it. It's not off of the screen, it's not cut off into any panel. You know, this clear text even at a resize 200%. So that's 1.4.4 resize text. Then you have things like 1.4.10, which is a reflow. So the content reflows for zoom on small screens without loss of function, right? So we know what reflow is. If you go to my channel, there is a video on reflow if you need to understand how it works. But just know that when content is moved to a smaller viewport size or it needs to kind of realign and without any loss of function, it's for both zoom in and or if you go into smaller screens. So if you zoom into like 400%, you need to have all your content presented without the horizontal scroll bar appearing, right? There are exceptions to that. Yeah, I mean, you can go into the video and see that. And then you have 4.1.2, which is name, role, value. So there has to be proper semantic HTML and ARIA, so assistive technology, which is screen readers, can interpret UI elements, right? That's very, very important. And then you have a 2.4.7, which is focus visible. So visible keyboard focus indicators for low vision users is very important, right? So when you tab through your content needs to have a visible focus indicator. So these are the requirements for visual. Moving on to the next one, which is auditory or speech, right? So auditory or speech disabilities, the way you would define it probably is they're impairments affecting the ability to hear audio content or to produce or use verbal speech for communication, right? So deafness, hard of hearing, and the different speech disabilities like stuttering, aphasia, apraxia, and other conditions affecting spoken communication. So anything that affects your speech, right, is a speech disability, and anything that affects your hearing is an auditory disability. Now, with WCAG, it has very clear instructions for these disabilities. So 1.2.2 captions pre-recorded and 1.2.4 captions live. These are talking about synchronized captions for audio and video content. So your audio and video content should have synchronized captions. For 1.2.2 captions pre-recorded is required in the AA 2.1 WCAG standards. And then you have a 1.2.4 captions, which is a AAA requirement. Okay, but you need to have these. Then you have 1.2.1 and 1.2.3 audio only and video only alternatives. So you need to have text transcripts for audio only content, right? So having a text alternative is very important, and these are called transcripts for audio only and video only content. You have 1.2.6, which is sign language. This is again a AAA. So sign language interpretation for pre-recorded audio needs to be there in place to fulfill a AAA level. And then you have audio controls, right? So 1.4.2 audio control, ability to pause and stop background audio is very important again. So avoid requiring voice and speech input as the only interaction method, right? So sometimes you have software which needs you to use your voice or your speech to be able to convey something or to interact with a functionality on the page. That needs to be avoided. So we need to avoid requiring voice and speech input as the only interaction method. You have to provide text-based alternatives for users with speech disabilities. That's important. Then you can come down to the motor or dexterity disabilities. Motor is basically impairments limiting physical movement. So physical movement, muscle control, or very fine motor coordination needed to operate, say, a mouse or a keyboard or a touch screen, right? So anything which impairs you from moving to be able to access a mouse or a keyboard or a touch screen, to be able to access the internet, is a motor or dexterity disabilities, right? So examples could be partial or full paralysis. Parkinson's is a huge example because you have tremors, right? So your hands are shaking when you're trying to access something. That's a disability. There is a limited range of motion for some people, right? Some people can move their hands, but to a certain level. Okay, so that's another form of disability. Amputation or missing limbs. Sometimes people just don't have hands, right? So that's another form of disability. Arthritis. So many people we know of and have got arthritis. And arthritis is a disease that causes your joints to go stiff and swell up, right? And so there's limited movement in your hands. And then there are like temporary impairments as well. Like sometimes you might have been in an accident, or you must have fallen down or something, broken your arm, or you have a sprain, you can't move your arm or something, right? Those are temporary impairments. And so you have all these different kinds of impairments which come under the motor and dexterity disabilities. Okay, so there are WCAG requirements for this and around this as well. 2.1.1 keyboard. All functionality has to be operable via keyboard alone. So complete keyboard access without other ways of accessing, like only the keyboard. Yeah, are you able to access your content with just the keyboard? That's a very important thing. Then 2.1.2, which says no keyboard trap. So users can navigate away from any component. Like if you are, for example, you've opened up, say, a little pop-up, okay, and you are inside of this dialog box. Now, within the dialog box, you do what you have to do, but you'd find that there is no way to close that dialog box. There's no way to come out of it. The escape key has not been established. You don't have anything, a button with which you can close that dialog box. So there's no way for you to come out, and so that's a keyboard trap. So that's important, that there should be no keyboard traps, right? And then you have 2.5.8 target size minimum. So the clickable and tappable targets, large enough to hit accurately. That's important. Then 2.5.1 pointed gestures. Avoid a complex multi-point or path-based gestures. Offer single point alternatives. Okay. Then 2.5.2 pointer cancellation. Actions can be cancelled before completion. Example, release outside target, which simply means that for pointer cancellation, there is this idea of being able to make sure that the events are triggered not on a down press of your mouse, right? But on a release. So things like click events are good. Avoid using mouse down or, key press or something. Those are not events that should be used because of this issue, where, when people have, say, tremors and they have tried to they've clicked something by mistake and they've moved, they try to move away from it, but it still completes the action because it was on down click and not on release. Then you have these kind of pointer cancellation issues, right? So that's what it's talking about. Motion actuation, which is 2.5.4, don't require device shaking, tilting without an alternative, right? So you need to have alternatives wherever the device requires shaking or tilting for interaction. This is more specific to a mobile phone, right? So to smaller devices which have gestures in it. So if you require a device shaking or a tilting action, there has to be an alternative provided that does not depend on that, okay? And then 2.2.1, timing adjustable. Users can extend or turn off time limits. Okay, so that's about motor and dexterity. Then we have neurodiverse conditions, natural variations in brain function and information processing that affect attention, sensory processing, and social or communication patterns. Okay. Now, this entire section with the neurodiverse conditions is very hard to explain to people because it's not totally visible. Sometimes these are non-visible disabilities. People can have different kinds of disabilities that are not physically visible. So these are hard to explain, but they are there, right? For example, sometimes you may have autism. There is an autism spectrum, right? Because you have autism to the very simplest borderline, and then you have autism to a very high level. So in that entire range, people are disabled in different ways, right? So that's one of the conditions. Then you have ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, where concentrating on something for too long is very difficult. And so the ADHD disability does require that, you know, things be simpler, be clearer, do not be very cluttered, and can keep the attention of the person. It's not they're not anxious when they're reading your content, etc. And then you have the Tourette syndrome, or even sensory processing differences, can be under the neurodiverse conditions banner. So, WCAG requirements that are associated with this: 2.3.1, 3 flashes or below threshold, avoid flashing content that can overstimulate or trigger seizures; 2.2.2, pause, stop, hide. Users can stop moving, blinking, or auto updating content, right? So, that's important. And then you have 3.2.3 and 3.2.4, which is consistent navigation and identification. So a very predictable layout and UI patterns which reduce cognitive load is very important. Okay, so predictability is a very huge key. Like, you need to be able to give them the same, say there are 3 or 4 pages within a website, each page has got the same footer. Your navigation in the footer needs to be at the same location. Your navigation systems need to be in the same location on all the pages, since they are a unit, right? So just being able to predict, give them the ability of predictability is important. And so that's what we are aiming at here. 3.1.5, reading level. It has to be clear, plain language, supplemental content for complex text, right? So as much as possible, try to use simple, plain language. That's understood. A reading level requirement of, I think, 7th grader. So you need to have that level, English or any language that you're using, but to be understood clearly. So for comprehension, for understanding, that reading level needs to be maintained. Okay. And then you have 3.3.1 and 3.3.4, which is error identification, suggestion, and preventions. Clear, non-punitive error handling. Okay. So your error handling needs to be preventive, needs to be clearly suggestive, and errors need to be identified correctly, right? Now, one part is identifying this, but it also needs to be communicated to the screen reader user as clearly as it has been found. And that is very important. How errors are communicated is very important. Right? Then you have minimizing unnecessary distractions, ads, animations. It supports focus, and it reduces any overload, right? So then we move to the next one, which is mental health conditions. Mental health conditions could be basically conditions affecting emotional regulation, mood, stress response, or psychological well-being that can impact concentration and interaction with digital content. It's very important. Things like anxiety disorders, depression, is one of them. Because these are, you have heavy medications in these as well, right? So you have different situations with these ailments. Post-traumatic stress disorders, or PTSD, is a mental health condition that needs to be considered as well. Bipolar disorders, etc. So for this, WCAG requirements can be 2.2.1, timing adjustable, so there are no forced countdowns to create stress or panic, right? Your timing can be adjusted, so you're not left in a panic state, right? That I have to finish it, I have to beat the clock, I have to finish this, otherwise I have to start all over again. That fear isn't there. And then 2.2.4, interruptions. Users can postpone or suppress non-essential interruptions like pop-ups, alerts, etc. Okay. 2.3.1, flashing content. Avoid abrupt, jarring, and startling visual and audio effects. 3.3.4, error prevention, legal financial data. So confirmation steps and easy reduce anxiety around mistakes. So error prevention, especially for legal, financial, and very important data, requires confirmations at every point. Like when you submit confirmations, when you submit, if you've made a mistake, and very easy way to undo what mistake you could have done, you have made, etc. Right? So that kind of thing is very important again. And predictability, this is 3.2 predictability. So consistent behavior of components, avoid surprise or disorientation. So that's important again. And then lastly, we come down to the cognitive and learning disabilities. Impairments affecting learning, memory, problem solving, attention, or comprehension of information. This is what we are talking about here. Okay, so the types could be things like dyslexia. So it's a difficulty with reading and decoding text. Dyscalculia, and this is difficulty processing numbers. So yes, there are people who find it very difficult to process numbers, math, right? So it's called, there is a disability, and this is called dyscalculia. Intellectual disabilities, also maybe memory impairments. Aphasia is a difficulty of processing language, so can overlap with speech, right? It's cognitive, but it's also a speech difficulty. WCAG requirements is 3.1.3 and 3.1.5, unusual words and reading level. Plain language explanations for jargon and abbreviations. So it's very important to use plain language. Any abbreviations need to be expanded for the first time. That's important. Do not use jargon, which is like slang, or which is like words that, they wouldn't understand. Nobody would understand if not explained. Stuff like that. Don't use too much of riddles, etc. So that's important. Then 2.4.6, headings and labels, clear descriptive structure to aid comprehension. 2.4.5, you have multiple ways. So that is more than one way to locate content, such as your search, your nav menu, sitemap, etc. And then if you talk about PDFs, you need to have your bookmarks in place, or a table of content. These are different ways to reach the same content, right? So multiple ways to locate the same content is important. Then you have, and make a note that these are multiple ways, but also consistency is also important again. Consistency and predictability go hand in hand with this. And then you have 3.2.3 and 3.2.4, consistent navigation and identification. Like I said, predictable patterns, which will reduce learning burden. And then you have 3.3.2, labels or instructions, clear instructions for form fields and interactive elements. And lastly, supplementing text with icons, images, and diagrams to reinforce meaning. So all of these are important when it comes to disabilities. So these are the different types of disabilities and how WCAG supports all of these disabilities. Please like, share, and subscribe. And thank you so much.